Hello everybody, recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 67 of the Movement Debrief. And tonight, folks, it is going to be super duper good. We're going to talk about hip separation. Why is that important? Why should you be able to do one thing on one side and one thing on the other? I know I did that on the same side, but don't worry about it. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about a little bit of that spinal extension. Is it useful? Should you coach it? Do you need to work on that thing? Stay tuned. And last but not least, we're going to talk about, that's too much Serratus. Can you have too much of a good thing? These are the questions tonight that are on docket. They are asked from the people. They are answered for the people by this people. Fam recognized fan. Before I dive in, do you want to take your clients' movement capabilities to the next level to push them closer to their goals? Do you have someone who hurts in a lot of areas and you're just uncertain where to start? Well, you can have those two questions answered by attending Human Matrix. Yes, it is coming your way. This weekend, we still have a few slots available. Sign-ups for Portland, Oregon, November 10th and 11th. Hope to see you there. The early bird for Charleston, South Carolina, which is December 8th and 9th, is ending on Sunday. You probably want to sign up so you can get super cool discounts. Last but not least, in terms of Human Matrix, we have New Providence, New Jersey, February, I believe it's 2nd and 3rd. That sounds right to me. That does sound right to me. New Providence, New Jersey, February 2nd and 3rd, and of course, the week after, February 9th and 10th, in Boston, Massachusetts. If you want a little bit of me, you want a little bit of Seth Oberst, the king of helping people who are dysregulated and stressed to the gills de-stressify. And then you want my boy, Pat, aka Pate Davidson, taking your performance to the next level. You definitely want to come to the Revolution. It's going to be February 9th and 10th in Boston, Massachusetts, at my boys Pure Performance. I hope to see you all at one of those things, or maybe all of them. Follow me. It'll be fun. Without further ado, though, let's debrief, shall we? Before I debrief, though, I'm gonna vent for just a moment. A little juiced up. This has my normal juiced up. I had a patient today. He, let's see, this is a young fellow, 13 years old. Thought he had a partial ACL tear, maybe a meniscus. Turns out he didn't. He's absolutely killing it. Plays football. And his pops and his moms are very good football parents, in the sense that they were asking me, can we do plyometric training? Can we do back squats? Can we do heavy bench? How about deadlift? I want to get my kid stronger and more powerful so he can play the game of football at a much higher level. Fam. By fam, I mean parents. This kid was the first day we actually got him squatting and it didn't look atrocious. He can't jump and land without locking his knees out. Kid's got problems. And we're talking about taking a 13-year-old kid and putting him towards high-level activities that he's not prepared for. I don't understand the disconnect. It bothers me. We need our kids to be able to perform basic movement tasks before you throw the sauce on them. And I did my best to educate his father on this. Like, yes, he needs to be stronger, he needs to be more powerful. But if you're putting a Ferrari engine in, maybe my Honda Civic chassis, it's not going to work. We got to build those foundational components, and it was a very frustrating conversation. And I think it's sad to see that we still have these parents perpetuating, or maybe it's colleges, or maybe it's whatever, people thinking that their kid is going to be the next whoever, and we need to do things that whoever is doing. And he's just not ready for that. And I think being a physical therapist and working on establishing movement baselines with people, in the sense that we want to restore variability, we want to get people performing some of the fundamental movements under load, yada, yada, yada. I see so many people at a high age failing these basic tasks, and to throw a kid who's also failing these basic tasks into something that's higher level is disastrous. So please, educate your parents if you're working with kiddos that you got to slow cook this. Make sure they have the basics. You gotta learn algebra before you go to calculus, and hopefully that reduces a lot of these injuries like I saw with this kiddo. That's my little side note. Wanted to get that off my chest. Otherwise, let's debrief, shall we? First question comes from my boy Tim. Tim writes, P.S. This was on an email, we're bros. You should talk about what splitting the pelvis or hip separation is, why it's important, and what can reduce a person's ability to do it tonight. Well, you know what, Tim? I will talk about it tonight. Hip separation. Here's my pelvis. Not my physical pelvis, but you know what I mean. Hip separation. Basically what that concept is being able to do one thing on one side, one thing on the other. Well, that looks kind of like a sprint or a stride. That's what it is. That's what it's based off of. I have to give a lot of kudos to my boy. Okay, I don't think I've ever called Daddy O'Pops my boy, Bill Hartman. He's really got me thinking a lot more about this stuff, and it's muy importante. So I'll link him in the show notes if you don't know who that is. If you don't, shame on you. Anyway, why is this important? It's important because if I can do one thing on one side and I can do the exact opposite thing on the other side, with integrity, I can reason to believe that I likely have full dynamic capabilities in a particular region. Being able to flex the hip on one side and extend the hip on the other, and being able to do it on both sides, likely signifies that. Because in order for that to happen, when I flex the hip up into hip flexion, you actually get an opening of the pelvic outlet, or the infrapubic angle on that side ought to widen. On the opposite side, if I approach terminal hip extension, I get the reverse of that. The outlet on that side ought to close to generate full force. When I do something such as a sprint, and I go boom, full flex on the one side, I can allow for greater propulsion on that stance leg off, because I can generate all my force of all of the muscles that would anteriorly rotate the innominate and extend the hip backwards, which would push me further forward. If I lack capabilities of doing that, that separation won't allow me to put as much force into the ground, which will minimize my capabilities of migrating forward. It's important that we work on this. How do we work on this? Well, I'm glad you asked. Simple. I have outlined a hip extension progression, or at least I've talked about it in a previous debrief, which I will link in the show notes, which will be available tomorrow on zachcouples.com. But basically, you want to restore hip extension capabilities, number one, and then continue to challenge hip extension capabilities while progressively implementing flexion on the opposite side. Hopefully not like that amount of flexion unless you're gold member. You get that reference, plus 36 points. What does that look like? I'm going to start people with a bilateral hip flex position to start driving hip extension. So from here, that would be maybe feet on the wall in a do-it position, or whatever you want to use, doing some type of bridging or a posterior tilting of the innominates, or of the pelvis, I should say. From there, drop them into hook line. From there, you can go into a hip thrust position, driving the same thing. From that point, I'm going to maybe extend one knee to go to single leg, and you can go through the same, boom, progression. And then from that point, you can drive hip flexion on the opposite side and go through the same progression. I found that, and I'll link one of my favorite activities. Again, I got to give kudos to Bill and Coach Lucy Hendricks. There you go, don't complain. About showing me this technique. But it's a move that I've been using a lot. I call it a wall stride, that has been very, very helpful in terms of restoring hip extension limitations, which are often limited on people. Sure, Zach, it's all well and good. You can get hip extension while you got someone on their back or whatever position, but how are you so certain it's going to transfer to something in standing? I have an answer for that as well. You could use the same principles in standing. So maybe you're starting with a squat of some sort. And then maybe I'm going to, I don't know, like your classic wall drill, like the wall sprint drill. I know that some people have, and I even poo-pooed that in the past, but I've actually been coming back to it and using it to drive hip extension, and it's worked wonders. I had a guy today who, he's absolutely killing it now since I've been doing some of this stuff. But he had a low back, I forget what low back surgery he had, maybe it was a laminectomy, we'll say, and we couldn't get hip extension. And I put him in a wall drill, did the back pocket tuck, drove the hip into flexion, made sure he felt glued on that side, even threw a little bit of plantar flexion so we could get toe off into the mix, cleaned up hip extension and a deduction, so pretty. It was awesome. So you can progress to something like that. You can, how about this? Make sure that that position can be maintained in, say, a sprinter step up. Or in a split squat. It's all the same positioning. It doesn't really matter how you coach and progress it as long as you are doing something that ensures that that person can extend the hip while flexing the opposite hip as much as possible. Ideally, you want to shoot for 90 or above, because that seems to be close to mimicking sprint mechanics, which is probably the pinnacle of force production for most humans, I would say. So to summarize, my hip separation thing. Why is it important? It's important because if I can do one thing on one side and the exact opposite thing on the other, it ensures that I have dynamic capabilities on the hip. You would start by working hip extension, start in a more hip flex position, progress yourself to hip extension, then progress to hip extension with the knee flexed, work on standing activities to reinforce that. You could even probably move towards marching, skips, sprints, coaching the same mechanics. And if you do those things, you're going to have some amazing dynamic capabilities at the hip in all facets of movement, and your people ought to be in business. Tim, outstanding question, you man. The next question comes from my boy, Misha. He's a mentee from Russia, Dobropa Jalovitz. I forget what that means, but someone told me that once. Anyways, hey Z triple dollar signs. Ooh, that's more money, more problems though, Misha. Do you teach your clients how to extend the spine? Spinal extension, good question, Misha. Do I teach people to do this? Short answer, no. Next question, just kidding. But yes, I don't really teach spinal extension. And here's why. I don't teach spinal extension much because I have to think about how can I bridge the gap between whatever the person's goals are and what I have in my skill set from a movement perspective. For example, if I have my football guy and he is having a hard time sprinting, having a hard time jumping, having a hard time cutting, the kid that I talked about at the beginning, coaching some type of spinal extension technique is probably not going to be useful for him because he never really gets into those end range positions. At least I hope not. Otherwise performance ought to be limited. But maybe something like a squat, maybe something like a step up, maybe something like working on jumping helps me bridge that gap a little bit more effectively. Now, if I had someone who was hitting those extreme end ranges of extension, say maybe I have someone who's a yogi or a gymnast or what have you, then maybe it would be something that I look at. I just don't see that population that often, therefore I don't look at it that much. Moreover, because there is minimal transfer to relevant tasks, or rarely are we getting into that end range position, I don't think that it's something that needs to necessarily be practiced. As long as you can get that technique to be pain-free, then I don't see much value in making it look pretty unless it's something specific to the task that person's doing. But then again, would I go to a drill where maybe I'm just working standing extension? Probably not. Maybe if it's like a backwards bridge or a backwards bend of some kind, or some type of vinyasa, I would probably go to that specific task to elicit the change as opposed to working on spinal extension in the traditional sense. just because you don't practice it doesn't mean that you don't have access to that movement either. I'll give you an example. How often throughout your day do you raise your arms overhead? Probably not that often. Do you think, go ahead and try this, do you think if you haven't raised your arms overhead in a while, because you haven't practiced it, you wouldn't be able to do it? Well, I mean, I can't anyways, but chances are you can still probably raise your arms up overhead even though you haven't practiced it, who knows how long. As long as you can have access to the movement available, in the sense that we can get extension, we have all of the basic components needed to get extension, probably not something you need to work on directly. What I've found to be more useful for people in restoring the spinal extension piece is restoring hip extension, because as I do my backwards bend, yeah, don't use me as the litmus test for that, but as that happens, my hips need to be able to extend. So if I have hip flexors that are concentrically oriented, that's not going to allow me to excurse full spinal extension. Shoulder flexion, something I don't have. Also another way that you can utilize restoring spinal extension. Obviously a lot of the rib cage stuff as well. If I have a static rib cage and I don't have bucket handle capabilities and even pump handle, spinal extension is going to be very challenging. I find that working on those qualities, restoring movement variance in someone, seems to be much more effective than teaching the action itself. I also can't testify much to Mackenzie, because that is obviously another place that spinal extension is often utilized. I haven't taken any of their coursework. I haven't really read much of Mackenzie's books. I learned a little bit in PT school, but usually I won't poo-poo anything unless I understand it pretty well. So I can't testify to whether that's useful or not. Personally, I find most people hurt into extension, and a lot of times working in the opposite direction or making sure movement variance is restored, that seems to be more impactful for my population. So to summarize, Misha, do I work on spinal extension much? Nah, fam, I don't. And the reason why is because a lot of people in their day-to-day tasks rarely approach that end range position. If someone got into that position, I most certainly would probably work on that a bit. But I find that it's often not necessary. Your best bet is to restore movement variability in some of the directions that would be associated with spinal extension. Think hips, think shoulders. Make sure you get those options. Teach people to move in manners that best transfer to the goals at hand or help bridge that gap. And if you do those things, you ought to be in business. Misha, unbelievable question. The last question for today comes from Jake. And I apologize to Jake because I missed his question on the last one. So Jake asks, Big Z, in regards to the scapulohumeral rhythm in your funny ass tone. I guess that's funny ass, what it do? We are always taught that for a winged scapula, we need more and more serratus anterior in order to pin the scapula to the thorax. Or, how about this, to pin the thorax onto the scapula. With that said, is there such a thing as too much serratus anterior? And how do we test for that? Maybe a question for a debrief or something, if not now. Thanks, Big Z. Fam, recognize fam. Love it. Jake is a good question. Let's ask ourselves, what does the serratus anterior do? Let me get a scapula. Here it is. All right, actions that the serratus anterior does on the scapula, because it attaches to the upper 8 or 9-ish ribs, attaches to the medial border of in this part of the scapula, and it allows for what to happen? Scapular protraction or abduction and internal rotation, as well as some upward rotation. That's at the scapula. But what does it do at the rib cage? Because it also attaches there. Does it pull the rib cage back? False. You got to look at it from a different angle, fam, because the serratus anterior isn't a straight muscle. It's curved because your rib cage is curved. I have a phenomenal picture that I will share. I will share this picture. It's from Human Matrix, so if you want to learn a little bit more about it, you probably want to come to the seminar. But I'll show you this dope picture that I made. Well, I didn't make it, I got off of Fiverr. Let's see, serratus picture. If we look at the rib cage from a superior to inferior view, so you're lying on your back, I've sliced you in half with a huge katana, and we can see the rib cage looking this way. The rib cage is more curved. Serratus anterior is curved along the rib cage. When it contracts, what happens is the rib cage, or the ribs, will become more, the rib cage, will become straighter. Not completely straight, I mean, we're not dogs, but it will relatively straighten. Or the ribs will relatively externally rotate. Can I have too much serratus? Yes, you can. And the reason why you can have too much serratus is, say I'm someone with a narrow infrasternal angle. Well, this relative straightening of the ribs is precisely that. Ribs are straighter, the infrasternal angle narrows a bit. Not so desirable, even though you might be putting the scapula into a position where it's essentially pinned against the thorax. And I'll use that certainly in scare quotes because it is still pretty dynamic. And that individual may not weigh much. But that is also not a desirable orientation to be in because I've lost dynamic capabilities in the lower thorax and likely in the upper front thorax. That's an issue. We need to fix that. How do we fix that? I'm glad you asked. We would do things that create relative bend in the rib cage. That's why pecs are useful. Pecs can be useful because in an individual who has relatively straighter ribs or a narrow infrasternal angle, the pecs can actually help retract the sternum to create a bend in the upper thorax. Utilizing a very soft exhalation, the way I phrase it is a Diet Coke exhalation. So if you guys remember the commercial way back when, because I'm kind of old, just for the taste of it, Diet Coke. Well, if you did that really long, because you had the greatest Diet Coke of all time, what that will do is at the tail end of that exhalation, because you're sneak attacking around some of the superficial abdominal muscles, you'll get a contraction of the internal obliques and transversus abdominis, which are on the inside, will help bend the rib cage, will help restore length-tension relationship of a likely too concentric serratus anterior. That's what we want with that. That's what you would do if you have someone who's got too much serratus. So maybe it's a reach, narrowing your stance a bit so you get a little bit more pec, using that soft exhale to engage the deeper abdominal muscles, and perhaps that does some wild and crazy wonderful things to your serratus anterior. Now that being said, we have a case where we can have too much serratus, but how about this? In a wide infrasternal angle where I have someone who is super duper bent at the rib cage, serratus anterior might actually be advantageous for that person because serratus is going to help straighten the ribs. That person needs their rib cage to be less bendy. Maybe doing something like a side plank variation or even some type of reach into upward rotation could be beneficial in the upper thorax because it allows the serratus to relatively straighten the upper thorax. So you can have serratus be useful in two different contexts in that regard. One, it's probably too useful in the narrow, but if we kick in pec, allow maybe the serratus to increase protraction to allow the pec to retract the sternum, then we're in business. And maybe then we can utilize serratus, which is in a better length tension relationship or a better contractile orientation to do things like restore shoulder flexion or whatever limitation is present. For a wide, absolutely super duper useful because that can help straighten the rib cage when the rib cage is too bendy. So yes, Jake, you can have too much serratus, but just think about restoring the dynamic capabilities that that individual does not have. And in a narrow, typically that is the person who is too concentrically oriented in their serratus. Doing things to create bend in the rib cage via pecs, via deep abdominals is oftentimes incredibly useful. But you know, in someone such as a wide infrasternal angle, they might not have enough serratus, or maybe we could even say that the serratus is too eccentrically oriented, and that person may actually benefit from something that concentrically orients the serratus. Jake, unbelievable question, and I think that that's a good stopping point for us tonight. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. You have been beautiful, sexy, outstanding people, and holy cow, we got a lot of people tuned in, so thank you. Who do I see there? I see Daddy O'Pops, what to do, and is that Katie? Hey, how you doing? Anyways, if you want to learn more about me, here's where you can find me. I would go to zaccouples.com. First, subscribe to the newsletter. You're going to get 4.5 hours of me talking. 3 of them is going to be about breathing. 1.5 hours is going to be about pain. 50 pages worth of notes, a free acute to chronic workload calculator, weekend goodies every Friday, updates to, exclusive content you might be getting, discounts for products, all types of wild and crazy stuff. You definitely want to sign up for the newsletter. I offer 3 services also on my page. Who's saying something? Oh, well, you know what, Miles? You're 10-month-old. Got a good taste. Also, while you're there, you will want to sign up for a movement consultation. Maybe a toy you're not moving as well as you'd like to. Maybe you saw a bunch of practitioners and, I don't know, I've ruled out the big bad stuff, and maybe if I improve my movement, life would be better. I can help be your guy. We'll look at your movement capabilities, see what you can't do, get you to do that, and get you in business. Definitely look me up for a movement consultation. Another thing I can do for you, I can offer mentoring to you. Maybe, I've been doing some spinal extension, but I kind of dig what you're saying, Zach, and I want to see if I can maybe help my clients restore their movement capabilities, get them moving under load, get them to meet their goals. We can problem solve through that back and forth. We'll get some good back and forth questions, answers, all types of stuff, giving you some things you can practically apply to your clientele. Definitely sign up for the mentorship program. Or maybe you just want straight gains, or you're post-rehab, you're uncertain how to introduce the loading process. Well, who better than me to help you for that? What we'll do is I will do a movement consultation, identify your movement capabilities, design a program specifically for you, yes, you, to help reach your movement goals or your performance goals or any of your goals. And we'll get you in business. Definitely sign up for online training. Once you've scoured zaccouples.com, you'll want to sign up for me on iTunes and Stitcher at The Zach Couples Show. Because guess what, folks? There's 66 other debriefs. Some people can only look at me for so long. You'll definitely want to sign up for that. Please leave a review so we can grow the fam. Other places you can find me on all your social media devices. Facebook /ZCouples. My Twitter handle is @ZCouples. Instagram, baby, is Zach, Z-A-C, Couples, C-U-P-P-L-E-S. And you can find me on YouTube. Just search Zach Couples, hit the subscribe button. You'll get all types of cool exercises that I do with my patients and clients. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You have all been amazing. Keep it real, but not thinking things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving. And I'll see you next time. Deuces.